In March 2022, Uber partnered with its arch-nemesis in New York City, the yellow cabs. The two sides decided to join forces by integrating the Curb and Arrow app software into the Uber app. Both of these apps are licensed by the city to provide technologies for cabs, and they're both already used by riders to e-hail a yellow or green cab in New York. With this new agreement, New Yorkers now have the choice to use the Arrow app, Curb app, or the Uber app to request a cab. Uber users will see the yellow cab choice when requesting a ride. This is the latest development in the saga between Uber and the yellow taxi in New York. Before 2011, yellow taxis ruled the streets, but to operate they had to obtain a medallion, which is a permit from the city that allows drivers to pick up passengers. These medallions were created to limit the number of cabs in the city, protect drivers from taxis' oversupply, and provide them with a living wage. That solution then became the problem, as demand quickly outgrew supply and the number of taxi medallions remained relatively stagnant, driving up the price of these medallions into the hundreds of thousands and eventually to over $1 million for each one, and creating a wholesale economy for the taxi business based on these insane valuations. Medallion operators that hoarded medallions and purchased available ones at inflated prices to drive up the price of their portfolios, and lenders that offered loans to taxi drivers to buy the medallions. The total value of all medallions and assets related to them had value of $16.6 billion in New York City in 2013. The medallion system turned the taxi business into a monopoly, which, like every other monopoly, eventually led to a poor service. Riders complained that taxis used discriminatory bias and refused to respond to hails on the street, that they were not circulating in underserved neighborhoods, that they take longer roads to cheat on the meter, and that the service they got inside the cabs was terrible, making the whole industry ripe for disruption. Enter Uber. Using these arguments, Uber worked relentlessly to lure riders away, calling the taxi industry as inefficient, corrupt, greedy, and even a cartel. Passengers flocked to the convenience of ride-hailing apps, while Uber flooded the market with drivers that didn't need medallions to operate. The yellow cabs couldn't compete, as the medallion price bubble burst. The taxi industry accused Uber of bringing economic ruin to its drivers. Cab drivers were left struggling to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in accumulating debt for medallions that became virtually worthless overnight. Many cab drivers have been forced to declare bankruptcy, and the city saw a number of suicides related to the issue. New York City tried to strike balance between cab drivers and ride-hailing companies by trying to cap Uber driver numbers, essentially introducing another medallion system to the business. But Uber lobbied hard against this and won, letting its driver numbers float free. In 2020, the city struck a deal with the biggest holder of medallion loans to bail out cab drivers with medallion debt. The cabbies then tried to fight back another way, using technology, introducing apps that tried and mostly failed to match Uber's experience using yellow cabs. Two of these apps managed to survive. Taxi Magic, that later rebranded to Curb and was sold to Verifone, a company that operates the entertainment and payment system in about half of New York City's yellow and green taxis. The other half was operated by Creative Mobile Technologies, a company founded by the leaders in the medallion yellow cab industry, and offers driver-passenger media solutions, including payment services, content and advertising, and e-hailing through its app Arrow. Both of these apps seem to struggle. They have poor ratings and mostly negative reviews, while Uber continued to take riders away from cabs and turn the taxi business into a dying industry. The company didn't go unscathed. Its own drivers demanded higher pay and more benefits, resulting in the city forcing Uber to implement a kind of a minimum wage into its formula, successfully taking some of the revenue from Uber and putting it in the pockets of its drivers. Still, Uber suffered a public image as the villain that steals money from drivers while making billions of dollars. An accusation turned out quite false when Uber went public in 2019, showing that it was losing billions of dollars over the years and never turning a profit. It appeared that the ride-hailing business is very unprofitable. Uber then experienced with delivering food, groceries, and other products, which turned out more profitable than transporting people. This realization was confirmed when the pandemic hit in 2020 and all passenger rides ceased to exist, while food delivery numbers skyrocketed. Between 2020 and 2022, because of the pandemic and the fierce competition in food delivery and the protests against the company, Uber lost a lot of drivers and fell into a shortage of workers. This driver shortage, coupled with its effort to amend its public image, is what likely turned it to partner with yellow cabs instead of fighting them. Integrating both Arrow and Curb into its Uber app gives it access to roughly 14,000 cab drivers that can in theory deliver anything for it, including people. This increases its revenue at very little cost, while muting its harshest critics in the city, and smoothing Uber's relationship with legislators and policymakers, and also providing more options for its passengers. This seems to be a new strategy for Uber. It discovered that partnering with taxi companies instead of fighting them can turbocharge its business, especially overseas. The company said it wanted every taxi in the world on its platform by 2025, reflecting the change in Uber direction from a ride-hailing company to a general mobility super app. The partnership also helps yellow cabs to tap into Uber's much larger customer base. Uber's own drivers are concerned that the new Uber taxi partnership could mean more competition from the yellow cabs. How the tables have turned. Companies live in competition and die in consolidation. The partnership happened because both Uber and the yellow cabs aren't doing great, and they need each other to some extent. But whenever two corporations join forces, it is generally bad for the consumer.